Okay, we are now live on YouTube.
Fabulous. We will get started in just a couple of minutes. Thank you all. We're glad you're here. Secretary Cavey, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you here.
Good to be here.
And Samantha's here with you as well?
I think she's going to join us soon.
Okay.
I hope so, because she's got the PowerPoint presentation.
All right. And Julie will need to make sure we can share with Secretary Cavey and Samantha.
Yes, the settings should be set up so that they can just start sharing the screen, I believe, from the bottom of the screen. I don't have it set so that they can just start.
Okay, Delegate Barbae is joining us. That's a good sign. Jim, you are clean shaven. Look at you. Jim McNulty. Sorry, not Jim Gilchrist. Hello, Art.
Not Jim
Delegate
Gilchrist.
Barbae, welcome.
Why not, Jim? Oh my gosh.
I put on a tie for the first time in, well, since April 12th.
There you go. All right. Oops. So we will start in 1 minute.
Grab something to drink.
I'm just going to give a heads up. I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody who is unmuted at this point.
Hey, Jackie. Councilmember Sales. All right, lots of friends in the Zoom room. Thank you all. It is 7:30 and I think we ought to get started. I am just going to rename, let's see, where are we? Ryan Kirby, this one, we're gonna rename you. All right. Councilmember Glass, welcome. All right. Good evening, it's 7:30. I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Rockville and Gaithersburg. Welcome to the post-legislative session District 17 Town Hall meeting. We are broadcasting live stream on my YouTube channel. If you all want to tweet that address, Abby or Ryan, maybe you can put that in the chat. We are also, we want to welcome as many people as we can to join us in the room. We have a wonderful program tonight, and I want to start by welcoming Secretary Chris Cavey. One of the realities of being a senator is we've got something called executive nominations, and we meet and approve or vote on nominations to the executive boards and commissions. Julie, would you do the waiting room? So I don't have to.
Yes, I'm taking care of it. I'm going to take back the hosting so it's not distracting you during this part.
Thank you. It totally is. In any case, I have noticed that there just haven't been enough people from Gaithersburg and Rockville. And so the goal tonight is to educate you all about how you can learn about, apply for, and get appointed to a statewide board or commission. There is an enormous range, and we need people with expertise, interest, time, and commitment. And so Secretary Cavey, I am so glad that you were willing to take the time. You offered like last December, and I took you up on your offer. And so we're really glad to have you along with Samantha Ardinger, who's going to be doing the PowerPoint. So this will be just about 10 minutes or so. We'll take questions and then the four of us will share an update about what we accomplished during the legislative session. There are a number of elected officials that I will recognize after this presentation. So thank you all for being here. And Secretary Cavey, thank you for your time. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. First off, I just sent Samantha a text and she's online, but she's muted. So if you could have who's ever doing your tech work unmute Samantha, it would be wonderful. If not, we're going to fake it.
We can do that.
So anyhow, I want to welcome everybody here. I'd like to welcome everybody here. The governor's appointments office is responsible for over 580 some odd boards, which the governor sends appointments to. And as you can imagine, it's a huge ordeal. They range everything from A to Z, ag boards to youth camps to the University of Maryland Regents to the Board of Plumbers and everything in between. And we constantly are looking for people to serve the citizens of Maryland on these boards that are mostly advisory boards. Some of them are appellate boards. There's all sorts of things that you can do. It is open to everybody. We don't appoint on a partisan basis. We try to do the best we can for all citizens that we can get accomplished. And we work more on what your qualifications and what your interest level is, and not only where your qualifications and interest level, but we also need participation. So when you commit to a board, we'd like to make sure that you commit to servicing the board for whatever the term of the board may be. So it's a very simple process. What we're going to do is we're going to talk. Samantha's got a nice little PowerPoint presentation that takes 3 to 4 minutes to go through. I'll do a little bit more explanation after that, and then we'll answer some questions. Samantha Ardinger, who works for me, an attorney by trade, she is our placement director. So she handles a lot of the first line stuff that comes into the office. So I'm going to let Samantha take it from here. I see she's unmuted.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Am I able to share my screen? Have I been?
You should be allowed to.
Okay, perfect. Okay. All right, so I should be sharing this screen right now?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. All right, so, obviously Chris gave me an introduction. I'm not going to waste your time going through that again. Again, Chris kind of went over this, but this is just the formality of what we do. At the end of the day, the governor does have the appointing authority. We're just the ones who help assist him in finding candidates and kind of teeing them up for him for his consideration, as opposed to him sifting through hundreds of thousands of applications. Additionally, something else we do is if people apply generally for boards, we like to try and assist them to finding boards that might be suitable for them as well as for the board. So as Chris kind of mentioned, some of the boards are general, some of the boards are Senate confirmed. The difference being if it's general, all you need is the approval for appointment from the governor. If it is Senate confirmed, you obviously need confirmation from the Senate. For the timeline of that, depending on when you are appointed by the governor, depends on when you can take your seat. If you are appointed by the governor in what's called the green bag, or on the 40th day of session, you cannot take your seat until you receive Senate confirmation. Versus if you are appointed in recess or any other time outside of session, then you are able to take your seat pending Senate confirmation at the next session. So that's kind of the way to distinguish that timeline for Senate confirmed boards. So the green bag is something that we submit to the governor on the 40th day. It contains all names of candidates that we are nominating for appointment to those Senate confirmed boards during session. At that point, the governor then goes through and reviews for appointment the names in the green bag. And those names, as well as the names that were submitted in recess, are all set up for a Senate Executive Nominations Committee hearing. This past session was obviously held virtually, and some people were able to be waived a nomination hearing if they had already had one in the previous, I think 5 years is what they did. So once you get Senate confirmation, at that point, you are able to take your seat if you were in the green bag. If not, then you just get to keep your seat if you were in recess. All right, sorry, it went a little bit too fast for me. All right, so this is the website. So I'll copy this link and put it in the chat afterwards. But this is where you can find all of the best information for this whole application process, including any frequently asked questions that we get a lot, as well as the application link and the list of board names and descriptions. So I kind of put a little summary for each, but basically submitting an application is your standard link for whether it be a job appointment or a board appointment. In this case, obviously, you would be interested in a board appointment. So I'll go through that link in my next slide. As for the fact page, this is common questions that we get. Most likely any question you have will be there. So I highly encourage you to read this prior to applying. In addition, I also encourage you to look at the board names and descriptions tab prior to applying, because this is a list of the statutory language. And we get a lot of people who are interested in boards, but there's actually no seat that they meet the statutory requirements for. So a lot of the regulatory boards have very technical seats requiring a certain years or certain type of experience. And in order to be considered for those seats, you do need to meet that. So that's something to definitely look at. And also you might find boards that you didn't even know existed. Also, the Maryland Manual Online, and again, I'll go into this in another slide, is where you can actually find out more about what the boards do. So just based on the name might not give you enough information as to what the board does. And we're always looking for volunteers who are willing to kind of step outside of their comfort zone and look at boards that maybe, you know, they would still meet the seats, but it's not something that they initially thought that they would want to be considered for. All right. Sorry, just. All right, so this is for the application. These are the common questions that we get that I just want to let you guys know before going through the application. So the most important one, it does time out after 20 minutes. So we do ask you to have everything ready before you sit down and begin the application. The biggest thing that a lot of people don't have before sitting down is an updated resume in a PDF or Word doc form. You will need this in order to be considered. It's also going to ask you for what state agencies and commissions you're interested in. This is when I would suggest that you look at that board description in the Maryland Manual in order to have a better sense of what you're interested in. And then that also helps us in one, searching and finding candidates for that board when vacancies arise. And also, if we do find you, but there's just not an opening on any of the boards you have, then that also helps us kind of understand what your interests are. And if there's an opening on another board or a newly created board, we can reach out to you and gauge your interest in that. So as you see, I put a little footnote saying, if you're just overwhelmed and you know generally that you really want, you know, the Department of Health or something, you want to be on some kind of health related board, put that department, and that also kind of helps give us a general idea. But it is a lot easier for us to kind of find boards that work for you, as well as for the board if you do put specific boards. So I would encourage you to do that research ahead of time. As for salary, this is a big question we get because this is an application for both job and board applications. It has a salary component. Most boards are not paid, but merely compensate for or reimburse for travel. They don't have compensation. So we just ask that you put $1. That also lets us know that you're applying for a board or a commission versus a job. For background highlights, we ask that you do put the basics of your resume. Reason being, this is how we search for people if we're looking for somebody who has a certain expertise or employment experience for a newly created board or an opening that maybe you didn't apply to. So we do ask that you do that just to make yourself more searchable in our application system. And when you've successfully completed all 3 forms of the application, you should get a confirmation email. If for any reason you do not get it and you don't understand, a common issue we have is that you're doing it on your iPad, a tablet, or your iPhone. It will only work on a laptop or a desktop. If you don't have access to that, we do ask that you reach out. We have a paper application that we can fax or email to you. But just know, you don't want to put yourself through those 20 minutes of answering all the questions only to have it rejected because you did it all on an iPad. We do have that in bold letters before you begin the application, but just in case, you miss it when you're reading and you click the button, just keep that in mind. If for any other reason it's not going through, go ahead and contact our office and we'll try and figure it out, because sometimes it might have gone through, but for some reason there's a glitch in the system and you don't get a confirmation email. Either way, it's just best that you contact us and we can kind of help you through that. Sorry, it's going. All right. So how to find out more about boards and commissions. So as I noted before, under the quick links, it'll show you the boards that the governor appoints to, as well as the specifications for the seats on there. So it might require, 10 years of experience in the financial field, as well as you have to be a member of the general public, meaning that you're not working for any kind of government entity. I encourage you to look at that just to make sure that you're even eligible for that board, as well as the term years for each seat. So that's a great way to already check some things off the list or that would end up working for you. Additionally, the Maryland manual link is also under our quick links, and under the executive branch, you'll see that it lists Maryland executive commissions, etc. From there, you'll find an alphabetical list of the boards and commissions that the governor appoints to. And the link for each of those takes you to the MSA page for that board, which has a description generally of what that board does, just like the basic concept of what their agenda is. Additionally, a lot of those links also have links to the department website, which allows you to get more insight into meeting days, times, previous minutes from previous meetings, as well as a lot of other information. I know that the Department of Labor has an impeccable website dedicated to their boards. All right. And so that's it for me. So I think Secretary Cavey and I are willing to take questions now at this time.
Before we get into questions, Senator, I'd like to really kind of summarize what Samantha said by saying it's very, very important to apply. It's just like when we used to hear the old commercials for the lottery, you got to play to win.
Yeah.
You need to apply, because all of this goes into our database. And although you may apply for something now and it may not be available today, it doesn't mean it won't be available in 2 months, 4 months, or 6 months. And the first thing we do once we have an opening on a board or commission is we query into the database and we see who has applied in the past. We don't try to reinvent the wheel, because we've been asking people to apply constantly. And in some cases we have big pools of people, in some cases we don't. So it's very, very important. There's plenty of boards and commissions that should pique everyone's interest level. And as the senator said, we continually try to look for a wide range of geographic places for people to serve. So please just feel free to apply whenever. And I didn't mean to cut it all short, but if you've got any questions, we're happy to answer it. We're happy to take calls later on at the office, or if you need to email us, that's fine too. You can find all the emails on the website.
Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. Fatima, I know you've got a question, and I know there were a couple of people who have been especially interested in opportunities. And so a friend I've known for a very long time who lives in Rockville, Fatima Dariani Keenan, please ask Secretary Cavey.
Thank you for that introduction, Senator Kagan. So I've been a resident of Montgomery County over 30 years now. And so one of the slides mentioned that put your state agencies, commissions you're interested in. If you are interested in more than one, is it almost kind of we rank which ones we're interested in order? We check off more than one. Kind of what is that process about if we are interested in more than one?
If you're interested in more than one, that's fine. You can check more than one on any of the drop boxes. Feel free to. We have many people who have broad interests, and it doesn't. There's a lot of boards also that there's plenty of boards you must be qualified for, but there's a lot of boards that have citizen seats where any citizen can serve. Whether you're interested in stationary engineers or you're interested in something else, you can serve a lot of times on many boards and citizen seats. So you don't have to have a giant background or college education in something. If it's an interest that piques you, that's one of the most important things, because people that have those type of interests typically want to serve and they want to try to do a good job. So please feel free to apply for more than one.
Thank you.
Good question. I don't see other hands raised. Is there anyone else who doesn't know how to use the hands function but wants to raise their actual hand and ask a question of Secretary Cavey while he's with us? Okay.
I see Sam down there just waving away.
I'm not seeing Sam. So Sam, come in. I am not seeing. Sam Gerson, did you have a question? You'll need to unmute if you want to ask Secretary Cavey a question. Okay, Sam, we're not hearing you. You need to unmute yourself in the lower left corner where there's the little microphone. You need to unmute. Julie, is that something we might be able to help him with? Yeah, you are.
Am I unmuted?
You're good.
Yes.
We can hear you now, Sam. Go ahead.
I got lucky. I'm legally blind.
Oh, well, good.
And
We're
one
glad to have you
I
here.
have is that I presume that when you eloquated earlier, you were reading your PowerPoint presentation, but it would be appreciated if there's some way I could access a hard copy, either email to me or whatever it is, so I could print it out to read it. The other question I have is what kind of boards or groups or whatever do you have that have oversight or provide advisory information on independent living retirement communities in the state of Maryland, or are also known as continuing care retirement communities?
Okay, good question.
Because we're going to be having a lot of seniors, we're living longer, so you have to put up with us. We're not pretty like babies and stuff like that, but we need a lot of tender care.
There you go.
Well, there are boards that handle the subjects you've spoken about seniors, senior care. There's nothing necessarily specific to what you exactly said, but there are some boards on there that are through the Department of Aging, and there's especially board maybe two or three under the Department of Health that have some type of oversight of senior living centers, senior care, that type of thing. If you can go onto the website and take a look at our Dropbox, I'm sure, or if you want to go on the Maryland Manual, either one, I'm sure that you can find one. I would look under the Department of Aging or under the Health Department.
I've looked and I haven't found anything. What I'm not talking about, I know there's nursing. I know that there's assisted living oversight, governance, regulations, and so on. I'm talking more about the independent living, continuing care retirement communities, which sometimes are the entry level, like a Leisure World. Well, that's a broad example, but more specifically, a continuing care retirement community that will take care of you through the rest of your time. You sort of start out, and then as you grow older, you age and maybe become disabled or things of that nature. I have found no specific governance or oversight over independent living communities, and I believe it is necessary.
Okay,
There have to be
Sam,
standards,
Sam,
not
I'm
just through
gonna-
the Department of Aging. I'm
Sam,
sorry, Senator,
I'm
you're
gonna-
gonna have to put up with me.
No,
because
that's
I'm gonna keep
okay.
talking
All
until
right.
I'm finished.
So any specific questions, if we can follow up with Secretary Cavey and Ms. Ardinger, we can do that, but if there are general questions for the good of the entire room, if not, we really want to thank Secretary Cavey and Ms. Ardinger for being with us this evening, and shift to for our legislative agenda. Is there anyone else with a really broad question that relates to everyone else in the room? But we wish you good luck, Mr. Gerson, and we can follow up. We will get the PowerPoint and email it to you.
Okay, and Julie Palkovich Carr has my email address.
Yes,
I sure do.
So
I
if
can.
there's somebody else you could provide me
yep,
information that I could contact and talk to, it would be helpful.
perfect. We will do that. Okay, with that,
Senator, I'd like to thank you for inviting Samantha and I tonight. It was a pleasure to do so. We're happy to work with any of your constituency in District 17. Not a problem at all. We're at the other end of the telephone. Just give us a call.
perfect. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Ms. Ardinger. Thank you both very much for what you do every day. And I would love to need to change my schedule and on multiple Mondays need to show up at the Executive Nominations Committee to introduce residents of Gaithersburg and Rockville next year. So please consider signing up, take a look, see what's available, and definitely apply. So with that, thank you all. And we are going to pivot into the main purpose of the meeting, which is reporting on what we did in our 90-day legislative session. So the four of us, delegates Barbae, Gilchrist, Palkovich Carr, and I, will each be reporting on our work, and it will be in that order. I do want to recognize the wonderful elected officials in the room, and there may be some folks who come in whose names I did not capture, but I do want to recognize from the federal level, the remarkable Joan Kleinman, who is the eyes, ears, and more for our wonderful US Senator Chris Van Hollen. At the state level, in addition to the four of us, former delegate Aruna Miller from the district next door is here. Aruna, it's great to see you. And Doug Gansler, our former attorney general, is in the room. From the county level, Council Member Sidney Katz, our own District 17 partner in so many things, and then at-large Council Member Evan Glass, who promised me that he was going to show up in Gaithersburg and the Uff County when he ran, and he does, and he has. And so, Evan, it's always good to see you. We also have Karen Bushell, our clerk of the court, who actually swears in people who get appointed to the boards and commissions. From the municipal level, Council Member Lori Ann Sales from Gaithersburg, former Council Member Dolly Kildee. I want to recognize the CEO of the Gaithersburg Germantown Chamber of Commerce, Marilyn Balcom, who just announced her candidacy for the County Council. And then from the Democratic Central Committee, Jennifer Hosey. And Ellie Shaw Bilbidia, who does remarkable work on behalf of the District 17 Democratic Club. If you all have not liked that Facebook page, group page, please give that a like so you can get the inside scoop before things go public. We do share a lot of stuff there. So District 17 Democratic Club. So do that. And with that, I'd like to introduce Delegate Kumar Barbae, the chair of the Environment and Transportation Committee, one of only 6 committees in the House, longtime chair. He was first elected in 1990. He and I go back to 1986, working for our Congressman Mike Barnes in his Senate race. He's a longtime activist and a respected leader. Please welcome Delegate Kumar Barbae.
Well, thanks for that introduction. And, let me just say that at least we were lucky to have had a 90-day session in spite of having to be socially distanced and be in phone booths in the case of the Senate, or having us split up into 2 rooms in the case of the House. But we got a lot done. I'm, being the chairman of a committee, I'm going to try and go over the top things. We got a lot of little things done. And we had some disappointments, which are going to really set the stage for what we do over the interim before the end of the 4-year term. So let me just go through some things, not in any particular order, but in, I guess actually they're in the order in which they were introduced into the legislature. So let me begin with Maryland environmental services reform. There was a scandal associated with the head of the MES, that's the Maryland Environmental Service, and we basically completely reformed the organization. We took away voting power from the executive director. We required a great deal of transparency, especially in expenditures, because it's important for the public to know how their money is being spent. This is the Maryland Environmental Service is a quasi. Cheryl, how much time do you want me to use? Let me start with that.
I probably should have indicated that. I think if we speak 10 minutes or so, 10 to 12
That's what I
minutes.
assumed it would be.
That's what Art Milholland just did. So he just did a 10. I think that's right now.
10. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I thought he was surrendering. I didn't know. So in any case, it's a quasi-governmental entity that's charged with doing things the private sector ordinarily wouldn't do with respect to stormwater upgrades throughout the state of Maryland. So that was something that we reformed early on. Second, we reformed the way in which the Department of Motor Vehicles gives over information to ICE, the Immigration and Custom Enforcement Agency. What we wanted to do, when we first gave undocumented workers the ability to get a driver's license, the spoken compact was that you have to have we know there are a lot of people who are here not legally, but we want everybody who's driving to know about the rules of the road and have a proper driver's license. And we're not going to hold that against you if you comply with the rules of the road. Well, it turns out that MVA in some instances was sharing information with the ICE agency. And so basically we passed a law which basically stops that. And again, I want to emphasize that we want for everybody who drives to be licensed and competent, and that's a safety matter for everybody in the state of Maryland. And we don't want people to feel afraid that if they get a driver's license, they're going to be kicked out of the country. Second, the Clean Cars Act. This is something that almost passed last year, but because of COVID, ran out of time in our 70-day session. So what this does is it reinstitutes the $3,000 per car tax rebate for the people who bought electric vehicles and waited in line for their money to arrive last year. And because we didn't renew the law last year, they didn't get anything. And so this extends the law for another 2 years. It takes care of the backlog of people who bought an electric vehicle and helped us with our vehicle electrification program. And it also provides money for charging stations for your garage or carport. Next, the Tenant Protection Act, which was sort of a grab bag of a lot of tenant consumer protections that, again, also didn't pass last year because of COVID. And it's a whole number of things. For example, if you are a tenant and your landlord doesn't separately meter your utilities and instead says, oh, you owe us 20% of the bill, in this law, they would be required to show you the bill and show you the formula that they used, for example, to calculate what your fair share is. It's a transparency law, and there are a bunch of other little billing consumer protections that law entailed. I'll talk more about landlord-tenant bills a little later on. We passed a law that requires the Department of Housing and Community Development to give a preference to those developers who are developing net zero homes and high efficiency homes. Again, it's advancing the cause of fighting global climate change. There were a number of laws that had to do with urban tree planting and tree planting generally. One of them is a bill of Delegate Gilchrist's that will require us to plant 5 million trees over the next 8 years. I'll let Delegate Gilchrist talk about that bill in greater detail. But again, it's a part of our effort to try to sequester carbon in this instance. Affirmatively furthering fair housing. What does that mean? Housing is a part of the subject matter of my committee, and one of the biggest problems in Maryland, as in the rest of the United States, is we don't have enough affordable housing. And to a great extent, this is because local communities just don't like to build apartment buildings. Local community groups tend to oppose affordable housing in their neighborhoods. And what we've done with this bill is we have required local housing authorities and political subdivisions to report back to the Department of Health and Housing and Community Development what they've done with respect to affirmatively furthering affordable housing. This is the first step in what is going to be a multi-year effort to really address what is a very bad problem, not just in Maryland, but throughout the United States. Water pollution, intervention in private parties in civil actions. This is something that I was a little surprised wasn't already the law. What this law basically does is it affirms that if you're an individual who has standing to sue under the Federal Clean Water Act, that you automatically have the legal standing to intervene in a civil case when it comes to clean water in the state of Maryland. That wasn't the case in the law. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow good citizens who really care about water quality in some instances where the administration may not, it would allow them to intervene in some of these civil actions. And that's going to be another several thousand pair of eyes looking at our water system. Next, electric vehicle charging for apartments. You know, if you live in an apartment and you're lucky like me, I just plug my car into a regular wall socket, but not everybody who lives in an apartment has that opportunity. And so what this law does is it makes sure that provisions in recorded covenants or restrictions in condominium associations and homeowner associations that unfairly or unreasonably prohibit the use of charging, those kind of restrictions can't be legal anymore in the state of Maryland. Obviously, we have a lot to do to make sure that people in condo and HOAs have the ability to charge their cars, but this is the first step. Next, believe it or not, I'm getting to the end of this list, organic waste recycling. You know, we don't always think about it, but when you take food and you throw it in the garbage, if it ends up in a landfill, it's going to turn into methane, and methane is 40 times more potent a greenhouse gas than CO2. And so what this law does is it requires organizations that are large generators of food waste, organizations like grocery stores, like our school system, like local governments, they will be required by law to actually separate and compost food scraps under if two conditions are met. Number one, there has to be a composting facility within 30 miles of within 30 miles of where the food scraps are created. And second, the cost of composting this cannot be more than 10% greater than what the ordinary disposal cost would be. One group that has been specifically excluded from this law has been the restaurant industry. And the reason we did that was because they've really taken it hard during the COVID recession, and we didn't feel it was fair to impose this mandate on them right now, perhaps in the future. But for right now, you know, schools, grocery stores, and other large generators of organic waste are going to have to compost. Next, we have animal welfare is in my committee, and
Kumar,
outlawed again organized killing contests.
If you can start to wrap up.
Yeah, okay. Organized killing contests where, you know, a bounty is paid for killing the greatest number of raccoons or foxes or coyotes. It's really a barbaric practice, and we were finally able to outlaw it. And let me just go with one last thing, and that is I passed a law that the speaker asked me to put in, which I certainly was very excited about, which made it illegal for homeowners associations and condo associations to ban basketball hoops. You know, there's a very heavy racial component in this. And of all the social justice laws that we passed, this may not be the most earth-shattering, but it is the first instance where young people of color run into racism. And so that's going to be prohibited. Let me just talk about a couple of disappointments that we had. Number one, every one of the P3 bills that we passed to slow down the expansion of I-270 passed in the House for the third year in a row and failed in the Senate. And again, I'm not blaming Senator Kagan for this. It's other people. I had another bill that had to do with making it illegal for a gasoline car to park in a spot that's meant for electric car charging. It seems like it's a simple idea, but the Republicans in the Senate floor slow rolled it and we ran out of time, unfortunately. And finally, there's the Climate Solutions Act, which I'm sure some of you will ask questions about. There were serious disagreements between the House and the Senate, and I'd be happy to delineate those in detail if you would like me to. So I'll wait for questions during the question and answer. And finally, landlord tenant bills. Almost all of them failed. And I have very distinct opinions on why that happened, but I will say to you that it's still a problem, and the bills that were only in my committee and went to the Senate passed for the most part, but the more complex bills that are shared by my committee and Judiciary failed. So I'm gonna, we're still gonna have to deal with all these things. When it comes to the Climate Solutions Act, I'm pulling together legislators, architects, engineers, HVAC contractors, and we're gonna figure this out and fix it before the next General Assembly session. So I ran over my 10 minutes, but I'm chairman, I'm entitled.
Your chair, you get to. Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
Thank you, Delegate Kumar Barbae. Before we go to Delegate Gilchrist, I want to acknowledge that Sonny Holding, who is all that for Congressman David Trone. In my opinion, District 17 is very lucky because Gaithersburg, the northern half of our district, is represented by David Trone, Congressman David Trone, who just announced that he will seek re-election rather than running for other offices, which is great because he's been a very collaborative, wonderful partner. And then the Rockville half of our district is represented by Congressman by Congressman Jamie Raskin, who I've just been texting with. I've been texting and tweeting, and that's why when I look away. So Jamie and I assume David are on the House floor, and that's why they're not here, but staff is represented. And so thank you, Sonny. And then Gaithersburg Council Member Neil Harris has joined us. So I just want to give a special shout out to both of them. So with that, let's go to Delegate Jim Gilchrist. Jim, you'll need to unmute.
Thank you, Cheryl. And hi, everyone. It's good to be back. It's good to see everyone here in District 17. Of course, this session was a little different than last year. Two of the most unusual sessions we've ever had. In fact, I spent the first month here in my condo before getting more full-time down in Annapolis. So it's really unusual for 2 years in a row. So let me just talk about some of the items we covered in Annapolis this session. And I really do appreciate everybody being here tonight. For one thing, the state has had a goal now for 20 years to preserve agricultural land. And the goal is to preserve 1 million acres of ag land, and we're about to 800,000, and that goal was going to expire. It expires in 2022. So what we did was we updated it, we extended it to 2030, we added the Maryland Environmental Trust, and that way, of course, in this county we have the ag reserve, so it's a bit of a different situation here. But statewide, this is one way to preserve open space and land. So we did that. We extended it to 2030. It also includes local governments that have transferable development rights. So it affects a lot of programs across the state, and that's something that we were able to get done. Another thing that protects land is the Forest Conservation Act. And since the 90s, we've had a program where counties could use forest banks to preserve forest. And one thing in Maryland, about 3/4 of the forest is in private hands. Only about 1/4 is public. So to conserve the forest, one thing that we do is we put easements there, sort of like the Million Acre Bill. When there's development, one way to mitigate loss of forest is to preserve all this forest that's in private land. Kumar mentioned this bill. It was heavily amended a number of times. It includes a study on the whole topic. There's a sunset of the bill, and there's 5 million trees, as Kumar mentioned, to be planted by 2030. Again, 2030 shows up. So we're doing a lot there. And the tree plantings are meant to be it's not necessarily, you don't think of it as like forests that are way out there. This can be tree canopy in urban areas as well. That's also very important. You know, there was one bill I was working on about carbon procurement of food. You might have seen the Post had an article just the other day about, you know, farmland and what happens when certain farm activities occur. And one thing we know about food procurement is that there's a lot more greenhouse gas emissions from some foods than from others. So we have a renewable portfolio standard where over time we try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from our utilities, and we have programs for cars, and we try over time to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from our cars. So what this is, it's just a toe in the water of acknowledging that the state can have a role, and just in the food that they procure, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions there too. It's a small step, and we're still working on it, but it's gotten some good attention, and more you read articles that talk about it. You know, and Kumar talked a lot about the committee. Let me just talk about a couple other committee issues. You know, you can see on the TED Talks, I watched a couple today about bee colonies, and bee colonies are starting to fail, and it's been going on a long time. In fact, they had one speaker on today who said that's been going on for 50 years. And it used to be that 15% of bee colonies would fail each year, but now we're up to 30%. So this is an ongoing issue. And one issue that keeps coming up is neonicotinoids. So we've had a number of bills on this over the years. And this year we had yet another update of the neonicotinoids, just to make it a little more difficult for people who aren't eligible to use them to get hold of them. And this is an insecticide, and gets into the flowers, and it affects all our pollinators. So we updated that a little bit, and we'll continue to work on that and monitor that, and that's an ongoing problem. The Maryland Historic Trust, I'm on the board of the Maryland Historic Trust, and just this year they announced that they found down in St. Mary's City sort of the original fort, the original settlement in St. Mary's City, dating way back to the 1630s. And also they found they believe they found Harriet Tubman's birth site. And if you go onto the Eastern Shore, you can see every once in a while, you know, there's like if you're in Dorchester County and you're going to Blackwater Wildlife Refuge, you'll see that there's like a marker. And it says, you know, we think Harriet Tubman was born here. And there's a new park there that's getting lots of visitors. So now they think they've narrowed it down even more. And just about 10 miles away is where Frederick Douglass's birthplace is. So they're both over there, and they're both you know, important historic sites that they're working on and trying to figure out exactly what we know and what we can find out about them. We passed a significant capital budget this year, a lot of federal help, a lot of state help. And when you look at some of the items in the capital budget, it's sort of like taking a tour of Maryland. I mean, there's a life-saving museum in Ocean City. There's the Hippodrome in Baltimore, 2 minor league ballparks in Bowie and Hagerstown, hospitals across the state. There's work on the Chesapeake Bay. There's work in Western Maryland. You know, right here in Montgomery County, there was funding for a wider circle and for a couple of our food pantries, Manna and Nourish Now. Lots of work going on in the capital budget, and it's kind of fun to look through because it really does feel like getting a tour of Maryland. That's about what I wanted to cover. Thank you all for being here. It's good to see everyone, and I look forward to the discussion at the end.
Thank you, Delegate Gilchrist. And next, our third and final delegate, Delegate Julie Polakovich-Carr. She's on the Ways and Means Committee, a leader on elections and progressive tax reform, and so much more in her first term. And take it away, Julie. Thank you for organizing and helping coordinate the technical aspects of tonight. We appreciate you and your staff.
Happy to help. Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to see so many familiar faces and new ones here on the Zoom. And I know we have some folks who are watching the live stream on YouTube as well. So welcome, everybody. I just want to step back for a minute and think back to where we were at pretty much 5 months ago to the day as session was about to start. And there was an awful lot of uncertainty for us as members of the General Assembly, for our staff, for the public, for reporters, for our advocates, lobbyists, et cetera, about what this session was going to look like. And I think the biggest cloud overall was, were we even going to have a full session, or was there going to be a COVID outbreak? Would we have to adjourn early like we did last year, and as other state legislatures across the country who were in session in other parts of 2020 after us did have to adjourn early and did have positive cases. So it's very notable that we actually made it through this whole session, all 90 days. I'm not sure if there were any cases or not. There was rumors about at least one delegate, but you know, for the most part, it was a healthy session and seemed to go smoothly in that regard. But there was a lot of other uncertainty. You know, there was a lot of big issues on the table, important, timely issues for the legislature to address, from police reform, fixing our unemployment system, providing economic relief for Marylanders, individuals and businesses who are struggling, addressing issues around racial equity, overriding some of the governor's vetoes from last year, including on closing the background check loophole for all gun transfers and sales, and overriding the veto on the blueprint for Maryland's future and the Built to Learn Act, which has to do with school construction. There was a lot of big, meaty subjects on the table. It was like, were we going to even get through all of that? And the great news was we did. We addressed all those issues and more, which was wonderful. So this really was an incredibly productive session for the General Assembly. And I think some people know I'm a scientist by training, and I like data. And so I had my staff just, actually quantify this for me, because I think qualitatively we all felt like we got a lot done, and we got a lot of big important things done, including that long list I just went through. But we actually passed 749 bills this year that have gone to the governor's desk. That's a 10% increase over the number of bills that we passed last year. So that's a pretty sizable increase, and just an incredible number of pieces of legislation to get through in a 90-day session. I think overall more than 2,000 bills were actually introduced, and all of them that are introduced on time get a bill hearing. So it's an awful lot of work, but it was a very productive session in that regard. I think we've talked about it, some of the big issues that have happened this session. I perhaps maybe just want to spend my time here talking about a few of the bills that I worked on this session, and I'm going to share my screen. So as I said, it was an incredibly productive session for the entire General Assembly. I also felt like it was my third session and my most productive session yet in the General Assembly. I sponsored 20 bills, 10 of them made it out of the House, and 8 made it to the governor's desk. One's already become law. 7 more are awaiting the governor's signature. And just so people know kind of where we are process-wise, even though the legislative session ended a month ago, roughly, the governor does have a little bit more time to basically review all of those bills and to make decisions about which ones he's going to sign, which ones he's going to veto, and which ones are going to become law without his signature. So at this point, maybe a couple dozen bills have been signed into law. He he did veto a few bills, including some of the police reform bills while we were still in session, which gave the General Assembly the opportunity to actually override those vetoes before we adjourned last month. But the bulk of the bills, probably at least 700 bills, are still awaiting consideration by the governor, and really in the very near future, we'll find out the fate of the rest of that legislation. So let me first talk about one of the pieces of the economic recovery legislation that we passed here in Maryland, the Relief Act. I mean, this was back in February. It feels like forever ago, but it was really important for the legislature to step in and to make some really purposeful decisions about where we were going to put economic relief in the state. Because if you think back again to February, at the federal level, a lot had been passed. The direct stimulus checks to Americans, loans for businesses, so many programs at the federal level, but there were still some holes in terms of who needed help here in Maryland. And so I feel like the House and Senate were very thoughtful about where we put money into. We did provide stimulus checks. We provided some ongoing and actually really important tax relief for very low income workers here in the state through the Earned Income Tax Credit. That's actually an incredibly effective anti-poverty program. And so that wasn't just a one-time change. That's actually going to help people over the next few years as well, because we know that this recovery is going to take a while. The nature of the K-shaped recovery is going to mean that for some people, it's just going to, unfortunately, be a rough few years ahead. So very proud of that legislation. So that was kind of the main bill that was originally proposed by the governor and then very much shaped by the General Assembly. But one group that had been left out of that Relief Act was actually immigrants and many mixed status families here in Maryland, which there are many of. And so I was very proud that actually a bill that I've been sponsoring with Senator King from District 39 here in Montgomery County for 2 years to create a Maryland Child Tax Credit. The Senate version of that bill actually became the vehicle for providing some tax relief for working immigrants and mixed status families here in the state, and to allow them to get some of the advantage as taxpayers that they're putting money into the system. But unfortunately, they had been left out of pretty much every federal relief that had been passed up to that point. So the child tax credit is now a thing here in Maryland, but it was also a vehicle for helping immigrants in other ways. And so very proud of that. Otherwise, tax policy continues because of my committee assignment on Ways and Means continues to be a big interest area for me. This year, I worked on legislation with Senator Jim Rosapep to allow county governments to have more flexibility about their local income tax rates. Right now, under state law, counties have to assess flat tax rates on people's income, and that's just an incredibly regressive system. This was the second year that this bill had been tried, but it got across the finish line this year. And it's going to basically allow counties to, in a revenue neutral way, provide tax cuts for lower and middle income residents, which is something that I think everybody can support. I also worked on a piece of legislation with Senator Cory McCray from Baltimore City to ensure that everybody who owes taxes to the state is actually paying it. Because unfortunately, there are some people who are cheating on their taxes in a big way. And so we basically created a new program to incentivize whistleblowers, especially for people who work in companies, have inside information about how, say, a company or an individual is cheating on their taxes to the tune of $250,000 or more a year, to get that information to the state so the state can actually ensure that those funds that are owed to the state are coming in. And then the last piece of legislation that I will mention out of my bills that passed was another multi-year effort to ban the panic defense. This has been a really important issue for the LGBTQ plus community because the panic defense is basically a legal strategy that somebody who is accused of murder or assault might use, and where they try to blame their victim's sexual orientation or gender identity to basically excuse the defendant's own violent actions. There's a growing number of states who have passed this legislation. Senator Clarence Lamb and I had this bill last year. It kind of ran out of time because of the shortened session in terms of moving through the Senate, but this year it's on the governor's desk. I'm very hopeful that that one's going to become law soon, because even while we've been waiting here, I think 2 more states have passed a ban on this defense since we've adjourned session. So I think I'll stop there and pass it back to Senator Kagan.
All right, thank you, Julie. Delegate Polakovich-Carr, great session, great job capturing it. I am now going to share my screen and offer you all some insights into what I did. And let's see, Julie, I'm seeing, okay, there we go. So hopefully you all can see this. And I want to give a big shout out to my staff, both of whom are on this. My interns are not, but my chief of staff for the third year, Ryan Kirby, and my legislative and communications director, Abby Snyder. So I'm just going to run through these. Once I can figure out where the button is really quickly, page down. Nope. Okay. I tweet all the time. I've been tweeting throughout this meeting, this session, and I'm coming close to my 20,000th tweet. I handle all my social media myself. I also have a podcast that you probably, hopefully have heard about. It's called Kibitzing with Kagan, and it's available on the YouTube channel that is streaming live now. My Senator Cheryl Kagan page on Facebook, I update once or twice a day. And then my Instagram page, once a day, I post a photo that gives you a sense of what I've been doing. So COVID drove the session. My colleagues in the House gave an overview of some of the restrictions in the House. I can tell you a little bit more in the Senate, which Kumar referenced. They were called either phone booths or aquariums, but it was tough. We were masked, we were within plexiglass, we were in our voting sessions, we were in committee, again, divided by plastic dividers. We had 4 tests, COVID tests each week, 2 rapid tests and 2 PCR tests. We needed to show our phone to show a negative result before we were allowed onto the Senate floor. So as my colleagues have indicated, though, the great news is not one senator or staffer that we're aware of got sick. We had a couple of false positives that were a little scary, but we all got through the 90 days. Particularly Abby Snyder on my staff, but my staff and all the delegate staff have been really devoted to helping our constituents with unemployment. You may have seen my tweets. Every Wednesday, I tweet at the Department of Labor and kind of admonish them and plead with them to help our constituents from Gaithersburg and Rockville. Abby must have a magic wand somewhere because she's been able to get some intractable cases addressed. But we are available. There's a sign up form on cherylkagan.org. So check that out if you or anyone you know who lives in the district needs help with unemployment insurance. There's a lot that we got done. The Relief Act, this is some of the highlights of the Relief Act, which was a supplement to what the governor proposed. The Senate added a lot more to make sure that we were able to help small businesses and nonprofits in need. Julie Polakovich-Carr mentioned Governor Hogan's vetoes. We started and ended the session by overriding his vetoes. It's been fascinating. Hogan talks about being super bipartisan, but he vetoes our bills and then claims credit for them after we override them. That happened with the HBCU settlement, the historically Black colleges and universities. We are surely going to hear him brag about the 10-year blueprint for Maryland's public schools and more. So again, that's the historically Black colleges and university. So after he vetoed it, you see he's right in the center bragging about signing the new version. The nonprofit sector has been really burdened by COVID in a special way. Not only has their fundraising been diminished because they can't have their annual galas, and some of their donors lost their jobs. Some of their regular philanthropists and stuff at any level haven't been able to give in the same way, and the demand has changed or increased. So Jackie DiCarlo from Manna Food Pantry can speak to this better than probably any of us. But whether it's food, housing, mental health, or more, there is an increased demand, and certainly job training and so much more. Our local governments are also dealing with a diminution in revenues and some more demands. I was able to to amend a bill to look out for and offer more support for not just the nonprofit sector, which I work for all the time, every year, but also our local governments. I worked with MACO, the Maryland Association of Counties, and the Maryland Municipal League on that. Police reform was a real headline after the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Freddie Gray and too many others. It was really top of the agenda for the General Assembly. We have a still somewhat new Speaker of the House, a somewhat new President of the Senate, and they made it clear that we were going to be doing something, and something strong and significant. The challenge was getting on the same page, and so it went back and forth and lots of negotiation, but we got it done. And as Julie indicated, it was vetoed. Some of it was vetoed. So the Climate Solutions Now Act, Delegate Barbae talked about that. It's unfortunate that that bill did not pass, but 911, which I continue to live in, I think many of you have heard me talk about how 3 people in our district have died when 911 has failed. And I have dedicated the last 7 years to the memory of Carl Henn. You may know him as part of the trail that snakes its way through Rockville, but he was a wonderful activist, a great guy. And after he was struck by lightning and 911 system was overloaded, he ultimately died. And we have now passed 11 bills that are upgrading our 911 systems and putting Maryland at the front. I just kicked off our 4th and final year of the 911 Commission that I chair, working with legislators, 911 experts, telecommunications folks, cybersecurity, and the disability community, and so much more. We really have an amazing team and doing some very exciting work in this 4th and final year. And one of the issues that we are launching, one we're launching tomorrow, one we're launching Thursday. One is related to workers' compensation for the tremendous strain on the women and men under the headsets, our 911 specialists. The other is about a statewide 311 to lighten the load on our 911 centers. So really jazzed about both of those. So that's launching with some of the great experts and working in partnership with the Maryland Emergency Management Agency. And that director, who's about to become a cabinet secretary based on one of my bills, is my partner in this. And that is, so that is really exciting and makes total sense. So MEMA, the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, will be an independent cabinet department. And then the 911 board, which is currently in with prison guards in the Department of Public Safety and Corrections, which makes no sense, will be an autonomous agency under the new Maryland Department of Emergency Management. Kerwin 2.0 is the public school package that I was referencing. My chairman, Paul Pinsky, and many others have spent years working on this. And unfortunately, between Governor Hogan's veto and then the pandemic, we had to reconfigure it and pass a new version. But it's going to be significant in funding, oversight, and special attention for folks like non-native English speakers was one of my priorities, obviously based on our district, students with disabilities and others. One of my bills last year that was super important was establishing telehealth and authorizing that. I came back and passed a second important emergency telehealth bill this year. Our state superintendent of education said she supported telehealth, but put up a blockade every which way. And students need access to primary care, behavioral care, and dental care, especially during the pandemic. There was no way of checking up on our students. And so we tried to get that done fast. Unfortunately, the Republicans in the Senate slowed it down, and we had 86 school-based health centers, including several in our district and in our county. So we will, it's an emergency bill. As soon as the governor signs it, it goes into effect. I did a lot of work on elections. I'm the vice chair of Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs, which is the largest of the 4 Senate committees and the one with the largest jurisdiction and the greatest number of bills. So one of the bills that we worked on and Julie Palafich-Carr on Ways and Means was my partner on one of my major election bills that unfortunately did not move. Election bills had a hard year and almost nothing moved on elections, which was really supremely disappointing. I always do consumer protection bills. I think you guys know that if you are ever asked for your mother's maiden name as a security question, don't ever give it out. It's super easy to find. And at the hearing, I was able to read with the help of a friend and some others who did some online research. I was able to read out the last names of all 11 senators on the Senate Finance Committee, which a little bit freaked them out. It was like Jones, Smith, Thompson, Rosenberg, and with that information, you can really mess with somebody's financial assets and their retirement income. So that will now be outlawed. You must have another alternative. And so that got passed this year. My predecessor, I think most of you remember Jenny Forehand, who served with dignity for many, many years and is retired now and living in Indiana with her husband and family. She worked to repeal the state song, and this year it was finally time. We had new leadership in the Senate and House, as I said, and with all of the awareness of Black Lives Matter, the Confederate themed state song finally met its match. We did not replace it with something else. What we did is literally in the law books, just excise that and put brackets around it. And in the future, if someone wants to do something, they can, but that will be gone. And so I passed that. The governor just announced that he will be signing that bill. So that's good. The technology sector, I worked with a delegate from Howard County on this one, upgrading, changing the board, enhancing the prestige of the Technology Development Center, which does the Technology Development Corporation, which helps create and support and fund, nurture some of our startups. The Public Information Act, I work with Delegate Brooke Learman on this one, increased transparency and access to public information. Really important bill, and we passed that this year. I worked with Kumar's vice chair, Delegate Dana Stein, to increase and enhance Maryland's recycling market, and that bill passed this year, and that's going to make a difference for increasing access. Delegate Gilchrist talked about the neonicotinoids. That was my bill. I worked on that with Prince George's Delegate Ann Healy, and we just have to make neonics a lot harder to get access to. And so I passed that. And then I can't remember who talked about bond bills, but capital improvements. We got money for the city of Rockville, the city of Gaithersburg, a very exciting project for Interfaith Works, as well as for Banna Food Center. And more. There was more for schools and others, but again, I want to do this quickly. So this is our current map. I think you all know the census was last year. It got messed up and extended by COVID and by Donald Trump and his minions. We will be figuring out what the new district will look like. Governor Hogan has appointed an independent commission. They will present a bill to the legislature, and we've got 45 days to pass our own bill. And so that will be interesting practice in negotiation. It does come through my committee, and District 17 probably will have to shed some of its population, but we'll see what the rest of the districts look like. There were a bunch of bills that never made it in the press, but that are interesting and important. So each of my colleagues flagged a couple of those. So I'm not going to go through those. And then I mentioned my Kibitzing with Kagan podcast. They're really fun. Most of them are 20, 25 minutes. I've interviewed and chatted with everyone from Chief Marcus Jones to Jackie DiCarlo of MANA to the President of the Senate, and our superintendent of schools, and the head of Every Mind on mental health, and just many, many more. They're fun. So I check those out and consider subscribing. And just want to flag for you, the Gaithersburg Book Festival is coming up, and Hometown Holidays will be virtual. So hope to see you virtually there. And then we really hope to see you back in person. That is happening. And again, hope you'll engage with me on social media. And that is the end of my presentation. So proud to represent you, and thank you for being with us this evening. And with that, we will take questions.
And
And
I'll say, Senator Kagan, I think for logistics, we welcome people to raise their hands, their virtual hands in the chat function, or to give a wave with your camera on in case that doesn't work out. And then I'll also say that a number of people did email me some questions leading up to today's event. So maybe we'll alternate. And I know we have some questions in the chat as well. So maybe we'll alternate between you and I in terms of calling on folks.
perfect. Why don't you kick off, Julie?
Okay, so our first question is from Amy. And she said that Maryland is on its way to becoming the first state to provide access to counsel in all eviction proceedings. However, as Maryland continues to face the ongoing pandemic and eviction crisis, critical renter protection bills were not passed this year. What's next in terms of assisting the 200,000 households facing eviction?
So Kumar, you talked about housing. You want to take that one?
Yeah, and let me just say that a phenomenon that occurred in this General Assembly session is that policing took up so much the bandwidth of the judicial committees, both in the House and in the Senate. And human beings are human beings. And these issues with respect to policing just suck the oxygen out of the tent on many of the issues like landlord-tenant issues that you mentioned. There were some serious disagreements between the House and the Senate on a lot of provisions. There were so many bills on landlord-tenant that failed that it's really impossible to go through all of them. So let me tell you what's really ahead of us in the future. And that is that over this interim, the period of time when we're not in session, the 9 months, I'm going to convene a group of people to really look at what we can pass early in the session next year. Nobody wants an eviction tsunami. Early on, I and my vice chair wrote a letter to the governor asking him to extend the eviction, the functional eviction moratorium until the beginning of the General Assembly session. He didn't do that, but it's still in effect because the health crisis is still in effect. And so, I know we can solve this problem. We won't have to deal with the gigantic problem of policing. So that's not going to suck all the oxygen out of the tent for the Judiciary Committee and the Judicial Proceedings Committee. And it's my hope, it's my expectation that we're going to be able to get this done early next year.
Okay. Let's see. Vince Russo, your hand is up. You can unmute and ask your question. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. So I'm on the board of Twin Brook Community Association in Rockville, and one of the issues we hear about a lot from our residents is noise from cars with modified vehicle exhaust systems, and going along with that also speed contests as well. So we were looking, following with interest, the bill that came before the Environment and Transportation Committee, introduced by our neighbors in District 19, that would really ramp up the penalties for those offenses, because whatever the current practices are for enforcement or the penalties simply are not deterring the behavior. So unfortunately, that bill got the penalty component of those got gutted in committee. So
you remember the bill number?
178.
Okay.
So Vince, I'll start with that, and then I'll toss it to Delegate Gilchrist, who's also on that committee. So I will tell you that I talked to Rockville Police Chief Police Chief Brito, who's great, about this issue. I was in touch with Gaithersburg's Chief Sroka as well on this issue. I was outside having lunch with a friend who is actually in this Zoom room, and the number of vroom, crazy, noisy, disrespectful, especially during COVID while we were all eating outside and trying to stay safe and warm, both of which were challenging. And it was distracting and disrespectful and inappropriate. So I flagged it for them. I also got Senator Waldstreicher involved, who's the vice chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee. And there was some conversations about what some of the options were. So I'll shift it now to Jim Gilchrist. Do you want to speak about what happened in your committee to that bill and why that got gutted?
You know, we had a fire drill here at Americana Center a couple weeks ago, and this was the issue we were talking about when we were all standing outside. And I can hear just during this night, you know, cars very loud going up and down 355. I think I've noticed it more since COVID. When there's been less traffic, I think I've noticed it more. And I know this issue comes around and that it's coming back. And I know, I think John Becker's on here and he was going to get us more information on it. So this is an issue that'll continue to be before us and we'll continue to look at it.
Let me just say something about this. Typically, we have a lot of bills in my committee that have very high penalties, and the judiciary always testifies against them. And the judiciary is always very persuasive, whether in the House or in the Senate or in both places. I believe with House Bill 178, we passed it favorable with amendments. We lowered the penalty. It's true, but that's what we had to do to pass the bill. It did go to the Judicial Proceedings Committee and it didn't proceed from there. You know, we've had other bills, for example, with respect to increasing penalties for people who drive around school buses. And the judiciary is pretty fanatical about not wanting to impose mandatory penalties or substantially increase penalties. And it's a real challenge for the legislature. But, you know, I passed the bill. I amended the bill. I saw to it that we amended the bill in such a way that we could pass it. And I think they just ran out of time on the Senate side.
So I can echo what Kumar just said about the Judicial Proceedings Committee. We've had a bill about swatting, and it comes out of my 911 commission. And it's when you call and you say, the black guy who lives next door to me just murdered his wife. And the SWAT teams come out, guns blazing, and they're just sitting there watching TV and nobody murdered anybody. And so there could be death or serious bodily injury, and yet they haven't been. And right now our current law is like a slap on the wrist. So that's a problem. I have an intern working on this issue right now. Sean has been looking at it, and one of the issues that I want to learn more about and see what we might do for next year. So thank you for the question, Vince. I think we are all aware that it's a problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jennifer Reisman, you're up next. Jennifer?
Thanks so much for taking my question. So I actually have a question about schools. So as you probably all are aware, Maryland currently ranks dead last in terms of access to in-person instruction across the nation. And Montgomery County ranks last of the last within the state in terms of access to in-person instruction. And today's Montgomery County Public School meeting indicated that they have over 500 students on waiting lists for in-person instruction. And so lawmakers in Virginia, you probably know, took to the legislature to ensure that students in Virginia would have access to in-person instruction in the fall. However, here in Maryland, our lawmakers and legislators have not, and they've not stood up for children at all. So instead, you pass legislation to protect teachers who refuse to come back to the classrooms to teach our children. So I want to know, and I would like to hear about what you're going to do to ensure that Maryland's children have access to in-person instruction as soon as possible, which has been the goal of the Secretary of Education Department, and as well as a requirement of all of the federal dollars pouring into our public schools. So I'd like to know, what are you going to do to ensure that this happens?
Jennifer, thanks for the question and thanks for being here and thanks for your Twitter engagement today. You didn't mention where you live. Vince said he lived in Twin Brook in Rockville. Where do you live?
Yep, I'm in Rockville.
Okay.
And I'm a parent to a 5th grader who's had 10 days of in-person instruction in the last 417 days.
At what school?
She's at Mill Creek Town Elementary, actually.
Okay, so not in our district, but that's okay. We're glad you're here.
She's in a magnet program, but yes, she's in a Montgomery County public school.
Let me just
in 5th grade.
So, okay, so first off, as you know, they've announced today that 6 libraries and only 6 libraries and 2 senior centers are going to start opening. And I think it's delayed and it's about time. And I don't understand why they're not all open with different capacities and stuff. So I don't understand what this county executive is doing and how that's working. But it's a county issue. And so I'm going to toss it to my friends on the county council, Councilmember Katz and Councilmember Glass. If you guys are still here and willing to pipe in. Sydney, do you want to lead off?
I can. Thank you very much. And thank you for the question, Doctor. First off, for the schools itself, you're dealing with two different entities. For what the Senator Kagan was just talking about, the libraries are under the county executive, and part of that, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons, but part of that is the people who are working in the libraries have to be able to return, and some are working in the COVID, getting vaccine for people and et cetera. However, that has to be aside. But the Board of Education is the one who decides whether or not how they will be handling returning students to Montgomery County Public Schools. That's not the council as such, except the council has, under the Board of Health, had authority in that area. However, the Board of Health authority really just started, I don't know, 2 months ago. If Evan's still here, his memory might be better on the time frame. But prior to that, it was executive orders that we had to confirm. We could either vote for or against. We couldn't change. Now we can. But bottom line is that the Board of Education is the group that will be deciding on how the students will be returning to the buildings.
Thank you, Sydney. Councilmember Glass, are you still around?
I am here,
Hey.
and Councilmember Katz was spot on just about the separation of powers and the duties and responsibilities for the Board of Education. But what I'll just share with all of you, news that we received today at the council session, 56% of Montgomery County residents have received 1 dose. And that is huge. And according to the Board of Health, as Councilmember Katz outlined it, we're going to be opening up to pretty much the point where DC is going to be opening up, according to Mayor Bowser. You've probably all have read in the last 24 hours what DC is doing. We will get to that essentially the same point when we reach 60%. So we're almost there. And once all of these metrics are met and the health and safety of our community is ensured, I believe MCPS will follow. And it might not be for this year, but next school year.
Thank you.
And if I could just point out one other thing, and it gets nice and confusing,
No, this is
why would
not
government be
confusing. I have a
anything
PhD. I am fully aware of how this works, but none of you have taken a stand and answered my question about where you stand on access to in-person instruction for our children. You've limited in-person testimony, and you've made it impossible to hear the anger from parents and the desperation. I work as a psychologist, and I see the mental health crisis in my clinic every day, and none of you have failed. None of you have said, what are you going to do for our kids who have been out of school for over 417 days? What are you going to do?
Well, first off, I believe I actually did meet with you. I believe you were part of the group that I met with.
You have not met with me, sir.
But then I met with others, excuse me, but I met with others who had the same concerns. We meet with people all the time. We receive many, many emails on both sides of this issue all the time.
What are the both sides of access to instruction for our children, please?
If you'll give me an opportunity, please, Doctor. I was going to point out that the Board of Health actually is the county council sitting as the Board of Health. It's the same people, but it's with a different entity. I'm sure you're aware of that. Not everybody is aware of that. Having said that, again, as far as how students will return to the building, that would be up to, at this point, up to the Board of Education. That is not under the Board of Health. And to Evan's point, once we get to 60%, pretty much we will be kicking in at the same rate as what the state of Maryland is doing for their limitations. But at this point, it is the Board of Education that will have to make those decisions.
So I'm going to mention that we are running out of time, and Lisa Klein from Gaithersburg has a question. Delegate Polakowicz-Carr has a couple of questions that were submitted in advance, and I want to respect our schedule. And Lynn Nash is waving, and she's not saying hi. I think she's waving her hand. So Delegate Palakovich-Carr, why don't you bring us our next? And we totally understand there's a lot of passion out there on a lot of issues. So, but it's unfortunate we don't have a lot of time, but all of us are accessible through email, phone, and now potentially in person. But yeah, Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, we got a couple of questions in advance, basically about the I-270 project, and given where the current status of that is, and I guess if maybe Delegate Barbae can just briefly answer, at this point, since we're out of session, what role can the legislature have, if any, in terms of oversight of this project? And also, is there any opportunity still, given that the environmental impact statement hasn't been completed, to try to keep pressuring, I guess, the Board of Public Works to hold off? Like, what are your prognoses in terms of those?
Yeah, for the third year in a row, my committee in the House of Delegates passed legislation to either regulate, examine, or slow down the pace of the public-private partnership, P3. It hasn't passed out of the Senate. Really, the only line of defense with respect to the financing and the management of the project really is with the Board of Public Works, which is composed of the governor, the controller, and the treasurer. We're not going to meet again as a legislature until January. And at that point, it'll be I really believe it will literally be too late at that point. And so really, it's the Board of Public Works that you're going to have to appeal to. I'm sorry to have to say
just
that.
to be clear, the Board of Public Works is the governor, the comptroller, and our treasurer. So now,
I said that, yeah.
oh, did you? I totally missed it, Kumar. I'm sorry. Well, let me just amplify then that there's a swing vote. Right now, the vote is 1-1, and the swing vote is Peter Franchot, and he is running for governor, and he is looking for your support, and therefore that is a pressure space. We've got to slow down this project. It's being done in a way that I think is irresponsible. And I also think that we don't have the data in terms of a post-COVID life, because we're not going to have people getting in their cars 5 days a week and sitting on 270 at 8 a.m. or, earlier or later. So if people go back downtown, it might be.
Not only that, Cheryl, we don't know what the effect of self-driving is going to have with respect to vehicle use on the roads. There are two arguments about that, and we don't know yet.
Right. And the tolls are insane. And the fact that that information isn't fully available. There are many reasons to ask questions. Do we need some conversation about it? Absolutely. Might we need some solutions? Yes. But is this the right answer? And is it the right process? No. So that's that. So thanks to those of you who have been putting the pressure on this issue and keeping the mayors and council engaged, and the council engaged, and all of us engaged on this, because it's critically important. It's taxpayer money, it's the environment, and so much more. Lisa Klein, it's very nice to see you. It's been a long time. Why don't you share your question?
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'll be quick. I just wanted to elevate something that I wrote to many of you about that I was pretty excited about, and it's relevant to all of us sitting in our Zoom room right now, and all the kids at school who've been in Zoom rooms. The digital dementia, let's call it, that has occurred is pretty profound. And the state of Minnesota is pushing forward a bill fast that is a digital wellness bill for students. And we got a little lift off a couple years ago with HB 1110, which I advocated heavily for, that instituted best practices for the schoolroom and the use of technology, make it purposeful, give them breaks every 20 minutes, pay attention to eye strain and posture problems, and make technology work for the good of the student and not, debilitate them. So in the current environment, we have sort of children in a restraint situation where they're in front of the computers for 6 to 8 hours a day. And I think you all have your own stories and heard what's going on with some of these kids as a result. So I would love to take your temperature on your interest in doing a Maryland digital wellness bill for the students, that we could create perhaps a nonprofit to create, a task force that really pushes out on behalf of the State Department of Ed and all the school districts, wellness counselors in the space, and really get serious about it.
Thank you, Lisa. Julie, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, and I appreciated, Lisa, that you shared this as an email idea, and I said to you today that happy to look into this to see if there's some potential for legislation here in Maryland. But actually, as you were speaking tonight, it just made me think some more about it. Another bill that was moving this year, it passed the House but didn't pass in the Senate, but that had to do with virtual schooling. So my guess is that that issue is going to be coming back next year. And I'll say I had a lot of angst with that legislation. Actually, state law right now is that the state can set up all virtual public schools, which is with really no safeguards around it. And so the House legislation kind of put a pause on that, put the hands within the school districts to make that decision, but said they couldn't do anything here in the near term. But we were trying to build in just a number of guardrails and protections, because there is a lot of concerns with having kids, like especially kids that would be opting to be in virtual school for potentially years. So, thinking about it kind of a second go tonight, I think that might actually also be kind of an alternate vehicle of maybe where some of this could fit in. So I'll definitely circle back with you.
Okay. I know that Nina Liakos, you had your hand up, and Lynn Nash. No, you're good. Nina's not going to ask a question. Lynn Nash, you're up next. And then Janet Gallant, and I think we need to wrap up.
Thanks so much. Well, Montgomery County is home to 42,000 veterans and then their family members. The only veteran-friendly legislation that was supported by District 17 was HB 571, which was a property tax abatement. And I work for the Maryland Military Coalition as a volunteer. I live in District 17. But we know that we thank you for this legislation, but we know that while Maryland is 19th in the number of veterans, we're 31st in the best state for veterans. And that's because it's really expensive to live here. Towson University did a study on behalf of the legislature. It's called the Study for Employment in the State Defense Industry. And it found that many veteran-filled jobs in Maryland are actually held by military retirees that commute into state, don't live here. So we're losing out on income tax and property tax. So I'm wondering, will you sponsor and support future legislation that would make Maryland more friendly for veterans to live here? That means eliminating income tax on uniformed services retirement pay, which 31 other states already do, and reducing disability rating requirements for property tax relief. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. Colleagues, I'm sitting here messaging my staff because I'm virtually certain that Senator Ellis had a bill that we passed, and I'm thinking that there were others. And
I'll say, Lynn, thank you for raising the issue. Happy to engage with you more on this. I mean, my perspective being on Ways and Means is that it's not lack of bills getting sponsored. It's usually that the cost, and that's like true with so many tax credit bills, is the cost of them is kind of the barrier for moving them forward. I know we passed one out of the House this year. I'll be honest, I don't know. I kind of lose track when they go to the other chamber, but it was Delegate Nick Charles had a bill that was an income subtraction modification for veterans who had a disabled status. I'm not sure if that one made it across the finish line or not. I can check, and it didn't. Okay, I'm sorry to hear.
I'm looking at one right now. Senator Ellis, as I remembered, Senate Bill 269. Thank you, Abby and Ryan. Property tax exemption, disabled active duty service members, disabled veterans and surviving spouses refund. I know we had another one on pets for, animal service dogs. I think we had, I think there were.
Right. Excuse me, that tax refund bill specifically dealt with people who were caught in the VA rating period, and it would let them back up to 3 years from the time that they submitted their paperwork and got their rating, which is very helpful. But right now in Montgomery County, you need 100% disability before you get any property tax relief at all.
Okay, so Lynn, we do have to move forward, but please feel free to email us all. We are 6 minutes over, and I know there were a couple. Julie, did you have another question that was submitted in advance?
No, we can go ahead to Janet next.
Okay, Janet, nice to see you. Thank you for all that you've done on transportation issues.
I agree with everything that you and Kumar said about 270. I'm so glad to hear it. It would be very powerful if the four of you wrote a public letter to Peter Francho saying exactly what you just said to us.
I can say right here, I would be happy to help draft and co-sign a letter that expressed what I've just said. So I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, me too.
I'd be willing to sign on.
Yeah, I'd be willing to do that.
Julie?
Definitely. And maybe we can see if we can make it a delegation letter. It seems like there
might be a stretch in terms of turnaround time. But maybe we can encourage our colleagues from districts 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, 20, and 39 to do something similar. And maybe it'll be more influential if he gets 8 letters from 8 different districts than 1 letter with a bunch of names on it. So the 4 of us can have that conversation offline. So thank you, Janet. That's a good suggestion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I do want to recognize Teresa Warman is here, and she is one of the excellent staffers that help us get things done. She works with Jim Gilchrist, and I think I recognized everyone else that I was supposed to. My former intern, Linda Cato, is here tonight, and my long time ago campaign worker, Joe Vogel, and so many of you are here, and just lots of old friends. Former council member Yvette Monroe from Gaithersburg, who serves on my scholarship selection committee. Just lots of good folks here. So thank you all for being with us, and thank you for your interest. Please stay engaged, and we are accessible. We really work to year round to try to represent you. So thank you all for your time, your interest, your leadership, your engagement. Next year is an election year. There are going to be a lot of candidates for a lot of offices. I hope you will do your homework, stay engaged, and be thoughtful about whom you choose to support. And I just want to give a special shout out, since Joan Kleinman is now back in the room, that Chris Van Hollen is going to be on the ballot next year. And so this is not an election gathering, but I just want to remind you that we want to make sure that our super smart, super effective senator is able to serve us for another 6 years if he announces his intent to seek another 6-year term in the US Senate. So Joan, do you want to say 2 seconds as we wrap up?
Thank you for saying that, Cheryl. I think you can count on his filing in the near future for re-election, and we hope to have everybody's support. I know you all know how hard he has worked to bring federal funding to Maryland and to Montgomery County over the last, especially over the last year, but certainly over the last 18 years. So thank you, delegation, District 17, for all you do and for everybody's engagement on this call.
Thank you, Joan. Thanks for being with us. Okay, if there's nothing else, Julie, anything? Jim, anything? Kumar?
I'm
anything?
good.
Okay.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, guys. Good night.